everyone, happy start of summer. Welcome to my channel if you're new, welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Casey, this is my channel Casey Undercovers, and today we are going to go over my May wrap up and my June TBR. Before we get started, if you could hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't already, those really help me out to help grow my channel. I seriously told myself that I was going to actually film my video this time and actually get in front of the camera, but hair and makeup on my day off just does not happen. I just can't do it. I've been posting a lot of book review shorts lately, but I film those before I go to work, after I get ready before I go to work and my hair and makeup is done. So I have no problem doing those, but to do hair and makeup on your day off, man, it just feels like a crime. I just can't do it. So you're still stuck with picture me over in the corner there being your host. I'm so sorry. I will eventually get around to filming in front of cameras again. It's just so hard to make me get ready on my day off. Oh man. But without further ado, let's get into May's wrap up. In the month of May, I read a total of 6 books. I had a really good reading month. And I also read every single day of the month. I've been listening to nonfiction audiobooks, when I'm getting ready in the morning, when I'm cleaning, when I'm doing dishes, and that has really been helping me fill in the gaps from my reading, and I really am enjoying that. I got so many books read this month. I read every single day. It felt super productive. I'm continuing this trend into June, so hopefully this will be a newfound habit for me. The month of May started out really well with some really good reads and my second 5-star of the year, and then kind of fizzled out worse and worse and is continuing into a downward spiral. The first book I read in May was Drums of Autumn by Diana Gabaldon. This is the 4th book in the Outlander series. I read Hans Christian Andersen's Fairy Tales collection. I read The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff. I read Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. I read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. And I read A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. So anybody who's into stats, I can tell you that this was 1,962 pages with 23.3 hours of audio listened. So that was quite a good accomplishment for May. I feel pretty proud of this. Now let's take a closer look at all of these books. Spoiler warning for any and all of these books. I try not to spoil much in my reviews, but sometimes that can be difficult. So if you want to go into a book blind, feel free to skip ahead through a book. All of my videos are chaptered for you. Drums of Autumn by Diana Gabaldon is the 4th book in the Outlander series, and this is a historical romance. I read this book as a prompt for the Quest game. I am on Team Centaur. That is Amy's team. If you've not heard of this game, it's played with Kim from Expedition Through Pages and Amy from A-Star Reads as team captains, and I am on Amy's team, and unfortunately we had the horrendous prompt of a 1,000-page book. And just throwing it out there that this book does fulfill the prompt for our fantasy bingo for a book with pirates. The main villain in this book is a pirate, so if you still need to read one of those for our fantasy bingo, this one can do it. In the Outlander series, a woman named Claire has traveled 200 years into the past where she meets the love of her life, James Fraser. Now, in book 4, they are in the American colonies. They've been shipwrecked in South Carolina at the end of the previous book, and Claire and Jamie are traveling north through the southern American colonies to reach River Run in North Carolina. And this is where Jamie's Aunt Jocasta presides over a plantation. Now, along the way, they make the haphazard decision to help a convicted prisoner, Stephen Bonnet, escape. This later comes back to bite them when the convicted pirate ambushes them on the river, robbing them and stealing one of Claire's wedding rings. Now, there is kind of a dual storyline going on here, and in the present day of this book in the 1960s, Claire's daughter Brianna and her boyfriend Roger are nursing a blossoming but complicated relationship that comes to a halt when Brianna discovers an old newspaper death announcement that tells of the death of her parents, Claire and Jamie. Desperate to warn them, Bree travels to the stones and passes through time. Roger, realizing what Bree has done, follows her. One of my absolute favorite moments in this entire series is when Bree and Jamie finally meet. His long-lost daughter, who's been raised in present day, has come back into the past, and they meet, and this just warms my frozen heart so much. It's such a surreal experience because this is just something that no one ever thought was possible in this book, and even though I've seen the show and seen them unite, reading it made me like mushy all over again. It was so magical. This book in particular is written with 4 POVs, Claire's being in first person and Jamie's, Brianna's, and Roger's being in third person, and it was a little bit jarring for the reading experience. It didn't have the same flow that I love in Outlander books, which are usually just Claire's POV, even though Roger's POV had been introduced in a previous book. Something that I normally notice in Outlander books is that there is a point where the story stops and starts and then stops and then starts again, and it feels like it could have been 2 separate books, sometimes even 3, but this book did not do that. Even though it was very long, it's like 1,070 pages, it's a little brick of a book, it did feel like it had a true beginning, middle, and end that fit the book and the narrative and the story it was trying to tell, rather than multiple books shoved into a giant brick. Let's talk about the negatives really quick. What annoyed me the most throughout this book was the constant use of the concept of a shiver up the spine despite the heat. It must have been in this book 100 times, if not more. And it was just beating a dead horse to death. Everybody had, I had this terrible feeling, this shiver's going up my spine, but it's so hot and humid here, but I'm still chilled. And it was so irritating. Everybody just has this intuition, sure, but hearing it over and over and over again from every character, it was killing me. And it does really take a toll on a book when you seriously just don't like a single character who has a POV, and for me, that person is Roger. I don't like Roger. I've never liked Roger. I didn't like him in the show. I didn't like him in the previous books. I don't like him any better in this book. He's a jerk. I just don't care for him. And reading him and reading his POV and spending time with him was like rubbing sandpaper on my face. Roger is Brianna's love interest, but at some point in the book, they are separated, and Brianna is, forced to do like a fake engagement with Lord John, who is one of Jamie's best friends and confidants, and Lord John kind of bails Brianna out of an awkward situation by faking an engagement with her, and I thought they had a much more interesting dynamic, and not in a romantic way. John is gay, and it is not in a romantic way that I would ship them, but in a partnership, friendship way. Their friendship was way more interesting than Roger and Brianna's relationship ever was. And the storyline that I can never abide by in this book is the attempted redemption of Stephen Bonnet. This man can never be redeemed or forgiven in my eyes. I don't care if Brianna ever forgives him. I never will. Please stop. Please stop telling me that he did this one act of goodness or is the least bad pirate ever, and you cannot redeem him. Just stop. Stephen Bonnet is garbage. He is a garbage human and should be burned at the stake. Overall, I did really enjoy this book. I gave it 4 stars. It's not my favorite of the series, but I did think it was a strong outing for the series. I have a really good time reading Outlander books. Claire, Jamie, and Lord John are all characters I love to spend time with. Roger, not so much. Brianna, This is very much a character-driven series, though. The plot is very slow and stretches paper thin, over 1,000 pages. If you want a fast-paced, twisty-turny book, this isn't it. But if you want to enjoy watching characters exist together, this is a great series with a beautiful historic backdrop. They spend a lot of time homesteading in this book. That's something I like to enjoy watching programs of, so to read it and spend it with characters I really enjoy, I enjoyed that part of the book very much. So if you enjoy romance books, and this is quite spicy, but if you enjoy romance books, if you enjoy historical books, this is a great series if you can stand that each book is a brick all on its own. Hans Christian Andersen's Fairy Tales is a children's fairy tale collection classic book, and I had never read any of these before, even though I've seen many of the adaptations. I read this book as a prompt for my library card game, being an anthology series with a mythical creature on the cover, and also for a prompt for the Quest game being a paperback book. And as a bonus, this also fulfilled my prompt for r/fantasy bingo for a short story collection or 5 short stories. This is a fundamental read for any fairy tale lover, and unlike the Grimm's fairy tale collection, which is a collection of like folklore fairy tales, most of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales were actually original, which I didn't know and learned reading this book. I feel like if you love fairy tales, then you have to read the foundations of them. We see all of the Disney adaptations, all of the dark twisted adaptations, we read the retellings, but have you read the originals? Now, I won't lie, some of the magic was lost on me because I'm in my 30s. I wish I would have read this when I was a kid. But even so, I was able to enjoy quite a few of these. My favorites were The Emperor's New Clothes, The Little Mermaid, and The Ugly Duckling, who turns out to be the original Little Emo. Although I did find a few of the fairy tales like outright stupid or just bad, and I can see why they've not been adapted. Like The Princess and the Pea made literally no sense to me, but other ones were just okay. And because of that mixed bag of fairy tales, I gave this book 3 stars overall, but I still would recommend it. You still have to give it its due for being able to stand the test of time. And just look at that cover, how beautiful. Taking a complete 180 in tone, the next book I read in May was The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff, and this is a nonfiction history book. My prompt for this book was from the Quest game, and that was a book featuring firefighters. And while most of my teammates read firefighter smut, I went down the deepest, darkest rabbit hole I could find. Now, this book is something to be experienced, and a powerful experience it was. I listened to this book as it's an oral history. I feel like that's the true way to experience this book. It has a 45-person audiobook cast, and that really brought this book home. The Only Plane in the Sky reflects on a minute-by-minute history of 9/11 through the POVs of people who worked in the towers, first responders, politicians, people at the Pentagon, loved ones who got phone calls from the passengers on the hijacked planes, and so many more people who were affected on that day. Now, when I got into this book, I was sure that no book could be as heartbreaking and heart-wrenching as Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by Dee Brown, but damn, this one really got me. One of the most chilling things I've ever heard in my life was in this book when they had actual audio recording of one of the terrorists who was trying to make an announcement on the plane, but ended up calling into ground control instead. And you can hear him telling them just to remain calm, they're going back to the airport. And that is one of the most haunting things I've ever heard in my life. This book will not be for everyone because of its incredibly intense subject matter, but if you can stomach a heart-wrenching experience like this, I highly recommend listening to this audiobook. This was my second 5-star book of the year, and it will be a story that stays with me just like the memories of that day when I was 9 years old and hiding under my bed. It's hard to talk about 9/11 without thinking where you were on that day, right? Like, especially if you're an American, you remember where you were on 9/11. I was 9 years old. I was in my 4th grade class. We had just come back from art class, and my teacher, Mrs. Updike, was watching the news. And I remember seeing the towers on the TV screen, but not knowing what they were or what happened. She quickly shut the TV off. We were very young. We were 9 and 10 years old. We wouldn't understand what was happening. They didn't want to scare us, and they went back to teaching us in class. Later that day, I was at recess after lunch, and I got called to the office. My dad and my cousin Nikki had come to take me and my brother out of school. My brother was older than me. He was a grade higher than me, and the older kids in the 5th and 6th grade classes were watching the events on the news, and he did see the towers fall. Now, when we went home, my entire family was watching CNN in the living room, and I didn't know why I was scared, but I knew the adults were upset and that something was deeply wrong. I lived outside of Cleveland at the time, and all the planes had been grounded, and there was a bomb threat for one of the planes at the airport. In addition to that, we lived about an hour away from a nuclear power plant, and after the news came that a plane had crashed in Pennsylvania, the adults were really worried that the power plant could be a target. We didn't go to school the next day, but my cousins did, and they were 2 of 8 kids in school that day. Nearly 25 years later, I still remember like being confused, people, going to the grocery store and stocking up because something had changed. The Only Plane in the Sky is my second 5-star book of the year. I do not give 5 stars out willy-nilly. If you can handle this subject matter, this book is incredible. I highly recommend it. From one of the best books I read this year to one of the biggest letdowns of this year, I read Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This is a historical fiction novel. This was a prompt from my library card game, being a historical fiction in a small town setting. I also used this as my free pick prompt from the quest game, and it was my cover-a-thon from the Buzzword-a-thon cover-a-thon pick for a book with eyes on the cover. Lessons in Chemistry is about a woman named Elizabeth Zott, who is a scientist and mother who faces sexual discrimination in the 1950s and 1960s. After a misunderstanding with her colleague Calvin Evans, the head honcho in the research lab where she works, they pair up to complete Elizabeth's work after she was reassigned from her research. They fall in love, but when he proposes marriage in the cafeteria, she rejects his proposal, never wanting to get married. Sadly, Calvin dies as a result of a freak accident, and Elizabeth soon discovers she is pregnant with Calvin's child. Elizabeth is shortly thereafter fired from the lab for being an unwed mother when her pregnancy becomes known at work. We're going to skip ahead a little bit because this book kind of takes place in 2 parts, and later on, she becomes the host of Supper at 6, a cooking show that she makes her own despite the woes of her producer. They're really wanting her to be a sexy housewife in this show, but she wants to empower women to embrace their intelligence. She wants to speak on the science of cooking, and that's exactly what she does. And this is where this book really shines for me, is the cooking show. It was a lot of fun to watch, including the behind the scenes where Elizabeth was turning everything upside down to make this show what she knew it could be. The book also had great found family vibes throughout the book, and I really enjoyed that. However, and big however, this book makes a choice, and that is to have an SA scene within the first 20 pages. And I was sure it would never recover from that. At that point, I knew maybe 5 things about Elizabeth in total, and now one of those things was the darkest moment of her life. It was jarring, and it turned me off immediately from this book. And the story never really won me over because of that. It could have been a really good book, but I was never going to get over that happened to her in the very beginning of the book. It's jarring enough when it happens at all, but within the first 20 pages is something I'd never seen before. Even Game of Thrones and Outlander don't go that hard at that subject. The first third of this book was traumatic and completely off-tone from what I expected. This book has a bright pink cover. I didn't think it was going to be that dark. It's not at all what I was expecting, and now I know why this author hates this cover. I do too. I rated Lessons in Chemistry 2.5 stars. It is one of my lowest rated books of the year and probably my most disappointing book of the year. I was really looking forward to this. I really wanted to like this book. It could have been excellent, but for me, that first third of the book killed any possibility of a good rating. I was pretty sure I was going to unhaul this book less than 100 pages in, and that's exactly what's happened. I am unhauling it. Man, I'm so disappointed. I like cooking shows. I like strong female protagonists. I like books that represent women in a strong light. I have a whole collection on my Goodreads called Vagina Books about women's rights, women's health, women's subjects in general, fiction and nonfiction all. And this could have been one of those books, but man, did it just cut its own feet off right out the gate. And I honestly don't recommend this book. Other people like this book more than I do. So if you do like strong female characters in a 1960s misogynistic ass setting and found family vibes, then yeah, go for it. Give this a shot. Maybe it's more for you. Maybe you can look past that initial essay scene. I sincerely cannot, and this book makes me angry. Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner is a memoir where a young woman reflects on the connection she had with her mother via the food that they shared and her grieving the loss of her mother after she loses her battle to cancer. I had already started crying in H Mart. I was about 60% of the way through when we played the latest round of the quest game, and we got a prompt in that round for a nonfiction book, and lucky perk that you can use books you've already started in that game, so I used Crying in H Mart for my nonfiction book for this round. Crying in H Mart is a book all about mother-daughter relationships and grief. It's about multi-generational relationships between women, sister relationships, and grieving those that you lose. Also celebrating what you enjoyed with them, how you connect to people through cultural things such as food and fashion. This book, I really thought it was going to be great for me. And it's not that it's not, it's that it wasn't for me personally. I didn't connect with this book the way I usually do when I read memoirs. That could be for a variety of things. Maybe it was more of a cultural thing because I didn't really understand all of the ingredients and the dishes that were being referenced in this book that were from Korean, although it did inspire me to make kimchi fried rice, that's for sure, and cucumber salad. I was really, really hungry reading this book because a lot of it reads like a shopping list. I am now the proud owner of a giant bottle of roasted sesame seeds in a giant tub of gochujang. I gave this book 3 stars, and again, it's not that it's bad. The writing isn't bad. The story isn't bad. It just wasn't for me personally. I could not connect with it, but I think a lot of other people will. And I went reading through a lot of other people's reviews on this book, and I agree with a lot of what was said in regards to this book felt like something that Michelle needed to write for herself, but maybe it didn't translate to the best publication. It definitely felt like something she needed to get out. I think people who are grieving, who have grieved the loss of a parent, the loss of a close relative, maybe they would appreciate this book more than I do currently because I've not had that experience myself. Personally, it wasn't for me, but I could recommend this book for people who enjoy memoirs, who are in the mood for a sad story, for a touching story, for a story from another culture. For those reasons, I could recommend this book. The final book I read in May is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, and this is a dark fantasy book. My prompt for this book was from the Quest game for a bookish challenge. This book was my Buzzwordathon pick for 2 or 2, and it was also a library card prompt for a 5-word title and a book from my reading list, which again was my Buzzwordathon list. Now, after the last 2 books not being my favorite, this book cemented that my reading is in a downward spiral. The Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher is a dark fantasy retelling of the classic Grimm's Brothers fairy tale, The Goose Girl. In this book, a 14-year-old girl named Cordelia is the daughter of a sorceress named Evangeline, who abuses and controls her daughter using magic. Cordelia is terrified of her mother, who often puts her into a state of obedience, where Cordelia has no free will and is controlled by her mother like a puppet. Evangeline has recently been dismissed by her benefactor and must find a new one to support her and Cordelia. However, this time Evangeline is searching for a more permanent solution, finding a wealthy man to marry her and eventually marrying Cordelia off to a wealthy man as well. Uprooting themselves to join her new victim, Samuel, at the lovely estate of Chatham, we meet Hester, Samuel's sister, who immediately recognizes Evangeline for the gold digger that she is and begins to plan how to rid themselves of her. Hester takes a liking to Cordelia, however, seeing that she is not like her mother, but a scared little girl in need of help. This book gave Mother Gothel vibes, Ella Enchanted vibes, and even some Carrie vibes, but it failed to live up to any of those books or characters in my opinion. I rated A Sorceress Comes to Call 2 stars, which is unfortunate because this was my first T. Kingfisher book and I really wanted to love it. Also, I love the cover. It's just sad. Far from just being lackluster, this book was outright boring, which was my real issue with it. It takes until about halfway through the book for anything remotely interesting to happen. And this book wasn't very long, it was just like 320 something pages, so to take that long to have anything happen on a book so short is criminal. And I found myself having to really push to read this book. and it's stretched out over several days, which normally I would breeze through a book like this in a day or two. And this book is frustratingly vague. The magic is not fully explored or explained, it just kind of pops up when convenient, and it's really never explained what kind of rules there are with her magic, with Evangeline's magic. The time period is estimated around the late 1800s, but we don't know. It's never really said. The location is maybe England. They keep mentioning the old country, which would make you think America, but then they go to the North Coast beach, and that doesn't sound like America. That sounds like England. So pretty much nothing is fleshed out in this book, and it was driving me nuts. Now, I will give a little bit of credit here. There were a few moments in this book that were scary and cool towards the end, but mostly it just fell flat. I think the loss of bodily autonomy is like the theme of scary in this book, which would hit harder, I guess, if I didn't live in 2025 America and didn't already have a lot of health issues where I feel like my body's out of control. But I guess if you aren't dealing with those things, that yes, losing control of one's body is a terrifying thought, but when you live it every day, it really just doesn't hit the same. When we talk about lessons in chemistry, that book wasn't bad, it just really made me mad. When we talk about crying in H Mart, it wasn't bad, I just didn't connect with it. But this book gave me nothing. It's not even bad, it's just nothing. There's nothing here. The writing is fine. The setting, I love a gothic setting. Give me Chatham, I suppose. But then the characters are all bland, boring. We don't really know anything about them. The story is nothing's really happening until about halfway through, and then nothing really happens until the end. It's just kind of people hanging out, being rich, and having a party while this gold digger's linging around. And no, this was just a no. No, I don't recommend it. I'll give Kingfisher other tries because I have several other of their books, but this one I'm going to say pass. Despite being a great reading month overall, May was really a mixed bag when it came to how much I liked the books. But to find another 5-star, the best book of the month was The Only Plane in the Sky by Garrett M. Graff, and obviously the worst book I read was Girl Give Me Nothing, A Sorceress Comes to Call by Kingfisher. Whew, deep cleansing breath. Now let's move on to what I'll be reading in June. Starting with the Buzzwordathon and Coverathon challenge hosted by Books and Lala, the prompts for June for the buzzword are memory words, and the cover challenge is a celestial object, and I do have a book that overlaps, and that will be What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. And this is the first book in a duology. This book has made an appearance on my TBR before, but I did not get to it, but I will get to it this month. This is a young adult historical mystery, I believe, and I don't know much else about it, but I am excited to be getting to this book because I've missed it once before. Moving on to my library card TBR. Library card is the TBR game that I play here on my channel seasonally. It is the last month for my spring reads, and I do still have quite a few of them left over. And sadly, most of them did not make it onto my June TBR, but I'm going to mention them anyway, just in case I can squeeze at least one or two in. The first one is for a late find and the oldest book on my TBR, and that is Blood and Gold by Anne Rice. This is the 8th book in the Vampire Chronicles series, and I am not lying when I say this book has been on my TBR since 2007. The next prompt is a fantasy set in a different country, and for this book I need to finish reading, I have started, but need to finish reading Oz Volume 2. This is the second volume in the Oz collection, which has books 4, 5, and 6 in it. I still need to read 5 and 6. And these books, of course, are by L. Frank Baum. The next one is a magical realism book under 200 pages, and for this I need to read The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This one I think I'm going to be able to squeeze in. For a romance with a castle on the cover, I am currently reading Cruel is the Light by Sophie Clark. I actually have a different version of the book than the one I'm showing you. I have the Fairy Loot edition, which I thought has a castle on the cover. And while I originally thought this was a castle, upon starting reading it, it's actually the Vatican, but we're going to count it anyway. This one I already mentioned being a series with a reptile on the cover, and that is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. For a reference desk pull where I pull out of my TBR bag, I pulled Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I don't know how many of these I'm going to be able to squeeze in, but I'm really going to do my best. For this month's round of the Quest game, which is a game that we play with Kim from Expedition Through Pages and Amy from A-Star Reads as our team leaders, I'm on Amy's team, the Centaurs team, and we did win the previous round by just a hair and really need to step our game up this round to absolutely dominate because that is what we strive for. We got 6 prompts as always, and this round of the quest runs from May 25th through June 21st. My first prompt is set in the future, and for this I am reading Cruel is the Light by Sophie Clark. I was unsure when I started this book if it was set in the future, but I've done some math and I think it's set in 2027, if my math is right. It is in the very near future, but it is set in a post-apocalyptic Europe, so I was told by the other people on the board that it counted. Our second prompt is Someone Else Picks the Book for You, and for this I consulted with my friend Anna. I asked her to blindly pick me a book, and it was no surprise when she picked a book she just read. I've talked about my friend Anna before. She is a hard sci-fi girly through and through who enjoys a sprinkle of horror touched in. And she chose for me The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor. She really loved this book, so I'm looking forward to it. The next prompt I've already completed because our game does not run from the 1st to the 30th or the 31st. It goes in a different time cycle. It started on the 25th. I already read the next one, and it was a nonfiction prompt. And for this, I read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Our fourth prompt had us spinning a random continent selecting spinner wheel, and luck would have it that we landed on Antarctica. Of all the continents, Antarctica. And I did find a book I was interested in, though. I am reading currently Madhouse at the End of the Earth by Julian Sancton. I think that's how you say it. And this is a historical nonfiction book about a quest that went horribly awry when the ship became trapped in the Antarctic winter ice. Our fifth prompt had us spinning a random country spinner wheel, and we got to spin 3 times, and we got Fiji, Guinea-Bissau, and Peru. And I have literally no idea what to read for this prompt. I require recommendations. If anyone has any suggestions for a book that takes place in one of these 3 countries, please let me know. And our final prompt was to read a book from our bookish challenge list. Mine is my Buzzwordathon list. And again, I will be reading What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. And I do believe that wraps up June's TBR. At the end of the month, I have more things coming. There will be another The Quest game coming up. I will be playing my summer edition of Library Card. There's more book readathons going on, always lots happening. And I know my books kind of overlapped in prompts, but if not, I would be reading 30 books a day. Nobody got time for that when you also work a full-time job. So join me back here in July. It'll be lots of fun. We'll be playing all kinds of summer things, lots of summer reading, and I look forward to seeing you then. What are you reading this summer? Leave me a comment, like, subscribe. Always come back and read with me. I love reading as a community, and I hope you take care of yourself. Bye.